The Georgia eviction notice. What is an eviction notice? Eviction notice, or notice to quit, is a letter sent by the landlord to the tenant notifying them that they should either take or stop a certain action or vacate the rented premises. Eviction notice can be of two types: conditional, when a tenant is given time to remedy the breach of the lease, or unconditional, when a landlord terminates the lease without any alternative options for a tenant. What should an eviction notice include? Information about the tenant and the landlord. The reason for sending the notice. The date by which the tenant should take or stop a certain action. The consequences of non-compliance. The date and way of notice delivery and the landlord's signature in the form of certificate of service attached to the notice. How to evict a tenant in Georgia. The non-payment notice. According to the Georgia legislature, the tenant failing to pay rent after it is due should get a notice from the landlord to either pay or quit, but there is no set period for such a notice. It means that the landlord can provide the tenant with a verbal or written notice the very next day after the rent is due and decide how much time to give them to pay sums owed. Non-compliance notice. The Georgia law lets the landlord immediately send the tenant a notice to remedy the violation or quit if they breach the contract in any way. But it's completely up to the landlord whether to give them a chance to correct the issue or not. What if the tenant fails to comply? If the tenant fails to pay rent due and associated fees or correct the violation, the landlord can file a complaint in the form of an affidavit with the appropriate Georgia court. The filing fee ranges from $60 to $75. Then, the summons and complaint should be served on the tenant by the court. In case of eviction for non-payment of rent, the tenant has 7 days to pay the unpaid rent before the start of the court process to stop the eviction. The same period is given to the tenant to file either an oral or written response with the court. Regardless of whether the eviction is contested by the tenant or not, the judge's ruling in favor of the landlord will lead to the issue of a writ of possession. This document allows the landlord to lawfully remove the tenant from the premises with the help of a constable or sheriff. The tenant should move out in a period from a few days to a few weeks, depending on how quickly law enforcement officers execute the writ.